In this exercise, we're going to be tracing some typography to get a lot of practice using the pen tool. And this might feel a little boring or tedious, but definitely stick with it because the pen tool is essential as a designer. Knowing how to use it fluidly is what separates amateur designers from pros. So definitely work as precisely as you can. And this type of exercise can also teach you a lot about how type is drawn. So it's actually really interesting. To start this exercise, download the tracing type template and open it up in Illustrator. You'll see that there's two layers, one where I've placed this word type. This is in a font called Dido. And then there's also a layer for draw. And a good way to start is actually to unlock the type layer so that we can just take a look at how this is drawn. Remember, this is a vector shape. I've gone ahead and outlined it. So if I grab the direct select tool, you can also get to this by clicking A. I can start going in here and looking at how this is drawn. You can see all the anchor points. And if I zoom in, I'm zooming in by holding down Option and then using the scroll wheel on my mouse. You can start selecting these points and seeing how the handles are drawn. So you can see on this part of the T, there's a point here, another point next to that, because that's a little bit of a straight line, and then a long handle on this point, and a long handle on this point. And there's actually some rounded corners here. So if I zoom in on this little corner of the T, you can see that there's actually 2 points that are defining this corner, each with a little bit of a handle. And then if I scroll down, same idea at the bottom. So these serifs have little brackets. That's what these rounded sections are called. That require some extra points. So even though this seems like a pretty simple character, there's actually a lot of complications to this. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to go ahead and lock the type tool again, or sorry, the type layer, select the draw layer. The other thing I'm going to do is go to view and make sure that my smart guides are turned off. Normally I'm always going to want these on, but turn it off for this assignment because the smart guides are going to lock you to the shape that's already there, and you really want to be working freeform so that you are making your own decisions about how to trace the type. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the pen tool. You can also get to this by clicking P. Okay, and I'm going to start with the top of the T here. I'm going to zoom in. And remember, you want to draw your type with basically as few points as you can. And you want to place the anchor points on kind of the extreme outsides, the extrema of the shape. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start here because I know that I'm going to need 2 points to define this little curve. So I'm going to click to create that first point. Okay, and actually really quickly I'm going to go up to the top and turn off my fill and instead add a black stroke. And then I'll change my stroke weight to 0.1 points just so that I can work really finely and I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I've clicked my first point. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and this entire top of the T is flat. So I can actually just kind of go to the other side of it, zoom in over there, and then hold down Shift, which is going to constrain me to that flat angle, and click my next point. Okay, so I'm going to click there. And then what I'm going to do is click on that point and drag out a little bit of an anchor point. Okay. And then my next point is going to be here, so I'm going to click and drag down. Remember, I'm always dragging the handles in the direction that the shape is being drawn. So I'm not going to draw up because that's going to be incorrect. Instead, I'm going to draw down, and again, holding down Shift because I want those handles to be perfectly straight up and down. Okay, so I'm just going to draw that out a little bit. Oops, and I accidentally let go of Shift a little early, so I'm going to click Command Z to undo that and try one more time. So I'm going to click and drag down. Okay. I also don't want this little handle here. It actually wouldn't really matter since it's totally parallel to the shape of the T, but I'm going to get rid of it anyways, and I'm going to do that just by clicking on this to get rid of that last handle. Okay. So now I'm going to zoom out. This whole side of the T is straight, so I can just go down to where I need my next point, which is going to be right here. So again, I'm going to hold down Shift, so I'm constraining it to being perfectly vertical. And I'm going to click and drag to create a little bit of a handle. And that's the way that this is going to be drawn, with just a little bit of a vertical handle on this side, and then a vertical handle on the other side as well. Okay, so you can see that this is a little bit off. I'm going to go ahead and click to get rid of this leading handle. Okay, and then I'm going to go back to my direct select tool so I can just kind of adjust this. Okay, so this point needs to have a handle that just extends a little bit more, and then this point needs to come in just a bit. Okay, so I'm just adjusting that to make it a little more precise. Okay, and then I can go back to my pen tool and just click on that last open point to just keep going. Okay, so let's go ahead and draw a handle upwards. So I'm going to click and drag up. This handle I'm going to want to be really long, because if I zoom out, you can see I have this huge curve that is going to be defined by this. Okay, so I'm going to just click and drag it up. It's actually going to have to be much longer, but I can adjust it afterwards. And then I'm going to make my next point right over here. Okay, and I'm going to click and drag out a really long handle. Okay, and then I'm going to click this because I don't want this next handle. You can see that that's going to cause me some issues, so I'll click this to get rid of that handle. And then once again, I'm going to go back to my direct select tool by clicking A or clicking up there. And then I can just go ahead and adjust these handles. So I'm going to pull this handle up, holding down Shift to constrain it. Okay, and now I'm right on the money there. So you just make those little micro adjustments, but just make sure that you are holding down Shift so you're getting it right on the line. Okay, let's zoom back into where we left off. And this is a little bit off, so I'm going to move that down just a touch. Okay, then I'm going to grab my pen tool and again hover over that last point, click to start back up, and then holding down Shift, I'm going to create a point directly to the side of that, and then click and drag out another handle. I'm going to click and drag down. Click to delete that last handle, and then I'll zoom out a little bit because this entire vertical stroke is all straight. So I can actually just scroll down and then zoom in to this point. Okay, holding down Shift to constrain it to a vertical. And then I'm going to click and drag out some handles. Okay, there we go. And my next point will be here. I'm going to click and drag out these handles as well. Okay, so, you know, I have a pretty good feel for how this letter is drawn and how these handles are going to work. If for some reason you get a little stuck and you're not sure how to draw a certain section, you can always go back and turn, unlock that layer and then select that layer and just start looking at the actual typeface and how it's drawn. So can go back and select these points and say, okay, well, I'm going to need a point here, and I'm going to drag these handles perfectly horizontal to define that little curve. So you can always go back and, just reference the actual typeface if you get stuck. So, if you don't know what the answer is, you can always go back and the answer is right there for you. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to go ahead and lock that layer again and get back to work. Grab the pen tool. There we go. Then let's go ahead and draw our next point. So we just looked at this, so we know that we're going to make a point here. And then we can click and drag that out just a bit. And then same on the other side. I'm going to click and drag out this point a little bit. And that's too much. The handles are a little too far there, so I'm going to grab my direct select tool and just take those handles and bring them back in a little bit. There we go. Back to my pen tool. Okay, and then this bottom part is totally flat, so I'm just going to scroll out and then scroll in on the place where we need our next point. Hold down Shift. And I could either drag out a handle, or instead, I'm going to go ahead and undo that by hitting Command Z. Instead, you could just click once, and then hover over it again, and then click and drag out the handle again. And that's actually a little better because now I don't have the handle going the other way, which is something I actually don't really want. Okay, so same idea. I'm going to create some handles going this way. But again, I made those handles too long, so I'm going to go back and just make those way smaller. This is actually a really subtle curve on this side. So just a little bit. Okay, and then back to the pen tool to keep defining that shape. Again, I'm going to zoom out, find the next point, and then I can click, and then click again and drag out that handle. And then do the same for the next point. Click to get rid of that handle. Zoom out. Okay, and then I can go all the way back up to the top of the T. Hold down Shift and click. Okay, and then click again on that point and drag out the next handle I need. And then drag out the handle at the top. Okay. I'm going to click to get rid of this handle, which I don't want. And then this T actually has a little bit of a flat spot at the top. The curve doesn't start right away. So I'm going to go ahead and just create that next point right at the base of where the curve starts. You can see it's kind of flat, and then the curve starts just right around here. So I'm going to place that point there and then click and drag out a really big handle. Okay, zoom out. And then let's go down to the bottom. And then drag down to define. Oops. And if you hit the end of the screen like that, it'll kind of scroll you down. So that's okay. I'm just going to scroll back up. Okay, so that's pretty close. This handle looks like it needs to be pulled out a little bit more. Okay, and then this handle just a little bit down. So just a little bit of micro adjustment there. There we go. That looks a little better. It's actually still a little bit off. Okay. So it looks like this top handle actually needs to be a bit longer than this handle. Okay. That looks pretty good. Okay. That looks good. I'm going to zoom back in down to here. And then I don't want this huge handle coming out that side. And also this is a little off. So I'm going to just take the direct select tool and just move that point down a little bit. Okay. The curve is still basically in the right place. Then grab my pen tool. And when I click, it'll actually get rid of that other point that I don't want. So I'm going to click again to just extend this out a little bit. Because again, I'm defining this little curve here. I'm going to go back up the other way. Click to get rid of that point. Then let's scroll out, and we've almost finished the T. So I'm going to scroll in on this corner. Click, drag out my handle. Okay, and then the last point, I'm going to drag that out. And then this just needs a little bit of adjusting. Looks like this one wants to come up a little more, and then this one a little bit in. All right, there we go. Okay, so now that that shape is completely drawn, I can go ahead and turn the fill to black, and you can see that I've created a T. If I move it out of the way, this T is pretty much identical to that other T. So I've drawn that with a lot of precision, and that's what I want you all to do with this exercise, is to just pay attention to all of the little quirks that are part of drawing a typeface, and get in there and get really detailed and just make sure you're following the way the type is drawn. It's going to be a few tricky sections that you'll run into, but remember, you can always go back and reference the original typeface. So for instance, this little ball terminal on the Y, if I unlock this and zoom in on that, you'll see that there's definitely some quirks to how this is drawn. There's a lot of points, but it's always going to be at the extrema of that shape. So one here, one here, one here, and then this one inside that's going to define the little inset into that shape. So best of luck on this exercise. It will take you a little bit of time, but I promise you it'll be rewarding and you'll learn a lot about typography and the pen tool.